Hello. It's Saturday, November 1st, 2025, and this is The Week, a deep narrative look at what just happened around the world, why it matters, and what to watch next. First, let's get into the proper uniform. Alright, guys, tonight the U.S. government shutdown drags towards a record as senators go home. Immigration enforcement is in the headlines again. Leadership shakeups, ice free zones, and a spike in threats against officers. A catastrophic hurricane tears through the Caribbean, grim milestones in Sudan's war, fragile democracy, and fresh strikes in Gaza. New long range munitions in the Ukraine war, and yes, bird flu is back in the news as cold weather sets in. I'm your host, and this is The Week. In Washington, the shutdown that wouldn't end. We begin in Washington, where the federal government shutdown has hit day 30 on Thursday and is poised to tie the longest shutdown in U.S. history early next week. The Senate adjourned until Monday with no breakthrough, though leaders from both parties signaled cautious optimism about negotiations, optimism that didn't translate into a vote. A House-passed short stopgap hasn't advanced into the Senate, and the White House and congressional leadership are sparring over add-ons like healthcare subsidies and tariff policy. Shutdowns don't just make headlines, they change lives. SNAP benefits, which are food assistance, were set to lapse today, potentially affecting over 40 million Americans, adding urgency to any weekend talks. Airports have faced on and off delays as air traffic controllers work without pay, with industry groups warning the system is nearing a breaking point, not a safety crisis, but a strain that translates into more delays and cancellations. Politically, the shutdown has been unusual in another way. Presidential travel during a funding lapse. In early eras, presidents tended to hunker down. This term, President Trump has spent significant days on the road, including Florida last night, even as Congress remains deadlocked. It's symbolic of how both sides are trying to win the optics war heading into next week's elections. Bottom line, expect Monday to be pivotal. If no agreement lands, the shutdown ties the record at 34 days, and the pressure will rise sharply from hunger relief groups, airlines, and voters. Point 2, immigration on the front page. ICE in the crosshairs. Guys, I'm just trying to straighten out the camera so it's like level. Yeah. Okay, there's level now. Okay, immigration enforcement has been a fast-moving story. This week saw a sweeping reshuffle of ICE leadership with at least 12 of 25 field office directors resign, and some posts filled by current or retired Border Patrol personnel. It's the third major ICE leadership shakeup under President Trump, signaling a push to integrate border tactics with interior enforcement. Major metros like Chicago, Los Angeles, and Washington are among those affected. At the same time, ICE and DHS say threats against officers have surged, including doxing and direct messages to families. DHS officials have described an 8,000% increase in threats this fiscal year. One widely cited case involved a TikTok solicitation to harm an agent. That figure was shared in the DHS-aligned messaging and picked up by outlets. Precise methodology isn't public, but the agency says it's treating these as credible risks. Cities are drawing lines of their own. Chicago created ice-free zones at schools, parks, and libraries, and it even lets private businesses opt in. an effort the mayor frames as protecting access to public services regardless of immigration status. And watchdog reporting continues. A Guardian investigation alleges that people are being held in small, off-book facilities for days or weeks in violation of federal policy. ICE disputes systemic wrongdoing, but civil rights groups say documentation shows a pattern. Meanwhile, enforcement continues. ICE reported 223 arrests along Northwest Indiana Highway since mid-September, part of a corridor operation. What to watch: whether the ICE shakeup leads to more interior operations, whether ICE-free policies expand to other cities, and whether Congress folds immigration riders into an eventual shutdown off-ramp. The Middle East, a fragile truce and new tensions. In Gaza, the U.S. brokered ceasefire remains dangerously fragile. After a week of accusations by both sides, Israel carried out forceful strikes on Tuesday, saying Hamas staged a tunnel recovery scene. Hamas accused Israel of multiple violations, and today, a sensitive development. The remains of 3 people transferred by Hamas to the Red Cross were determined not to be those of Israeli hostages, according to Israel. A setback for diplomacy and for anguished families awaiting news. What to watch: whether mediators can re-stabilize the truth framework, progress on verified lists for hostage remains, and prisoner releases, and whether regional actors, Egypt and Qatar, can pull both sides back from escalation. Number 4, Sudan, El Fasher Falls, atrocity reports mount. In Sudan's Darfur region, the war's center of gravity shifted. The Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, seized El Fasher, the last major army-held city in Darfur, after an 18-month siege. Humanitarian groups report mass killings and abuses during and after the takeover, and satellite analysis flagged disturbing imagery consistent with large numbers of bodies. With El Fasher gone, analysts warn of a de facto partition. The RSF controls most of western Sudan, as the formal army regroups elsewhere. Aid agencies fear hundreds of thousands of civilians are in immediate danger, with access routes cut and clinics overwhelmed. What to watch: whether international leverage, sanctions, arms, embargo enforcement, and pressure on foreign backers increases, and whether corridors open for evacuation and food deliveries before the dry season ends. And 5, Ukraine, longer reach firepower on the table. On the European front, the Pentagon approved the provision of Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine on October 31st, though final authorization rests with the president. Analysts say Tomahawks would add range and accuracy for strikes against high-value Russian targets, complicating Moscow's logistics. Kiev's fall and winter campaign remains focused on air defenses and deep strike precision as static front lines grind on. Risk calculus: the move would further blur red lines Moscow has tried to impose, but mirrors early escalations, HIMARS, Storm Shadow, ATACMS, that eventually became normalized aid. Watch for NATO political signaling and Russian retaliatory rhetoric in the coming days. 6. Climates and disasters. Hurricane Melissa's trail. A catastrophic Hurricane Melissa slammed Jamaica this week with winds near 185 miles per hour at peak, the strongest landfall in modern Jamaican history, and then tore across eastern Cuba and lashed the Bahamas and Bermuda as it curved north. Jamaica declared the entire nation a disaster area. Power outages affected over half the country, and early counts suggest dozens of fatalities across the region, numbers likely to rise as crews reach isolated communities. In Cuba, mass evacuations help reduce casualties, but flooding and landslides damaged infrastructure. Haiti suffered deadly flash floods amid already dire conditions. Scientists flagged rapid intensification fueled by warmer Caribbean waters, a pattern we've seen in recent seasons and one that challenges evacuation timelines. What to watch: weeks of recovery and public health risk, waterborne disease, housing, agricultural losses in Jamaica's breadbasket regions, and whether international relief scales fast enough. And 7, health watch: avian influenza returns. As temperatures drop, H5N1 avian influenza is back in the headlines. Hungary reported its first farm outbreak of the season, nearly 20,000 ducks affected, with culling to limit spread. part of a broader European public pattern that's hurt poultry supply and prices in recent years. In U.S. reviews this week, researchers emphasized that human infections have been mostly mild but not trivial, including at least one death since mid 2025, and that the virus has been detected in raw milk and milking equipment, a reminder to avoid unpasteurized dairy. Why it matters: the virus has spilled into several mammal species, cats, dogs, and even marine mammals and swine, which can complicate control. Public health agencies aren't sounding panic alarms, but they are urging continued surveillance and vaccination of poultry flocks where appropriate. 8. Across the pond, a royal earthquake. In the UK, a story shaking Buckingham Palace. King Charles III stripped Prince Andrew of his remaining titles and evicted him from the Royal Lodge, part of a broader reshaping of the monarchy's public face. The palace said that Andrew would be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor going forward. It's both a symbolic and practical move, and a reminder that the royal soft power brand rises and falls with public sentiment. And finally, some quick hits. Tariffs and Congress. In a rare bipartisan rebuke, 4 GOP senators joined Democrats to push back on some executive tariff moves, even as shutdown talks sputtered, a sign of intra-party friction over trade tools. Then state races. With off-year elections set for Tuesday, November 4th, analysts caution over overreading results, but in a long shutdown, even local outcomes can shift leverage on Capitol Hill. Next, education and health. Studies this week highlighted progress in reducing chronic absenteeism in some U.S. states, and food banks warned they are not designed to replace federal benefits if the shutdown drags on. Now the look ahead. 3 things to watch. Monday in the Senate, do leaders put anything on the floor, even a narrow SNAP continuity patch, to prevent millions from losing benefits? If not, the 34-day mark gets crossed. 2. Gaza diplomacy. Do mediators salvage the remains for prisoners framework, or does today's misidentification of remains poison the well? And 3. Post-Melissa recovery. How fast do Jamaica, Cuba, and Haiti get power, water, and clinics back? And do donors scale relief funding to match the devastation? That's the week for November 1st, 2025. If you found this useful, share the show, and check our show notes for sources and further reading. I'm your host. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Music out on... Why did I just read that ChatGPT tag? Alright guys, so I'm probably going to put a link to this ChatGPT chat. You guys can see all the sources. Let me see how many sources it used. It doesn't give me a number. Either way, it's quite a few sources. Anyway guys, let me show you what I'm working with here. So essentially what I did is I asked GPT to give me a very long report thing that I can just read out to you guys and like tell you all the stuff. This is obviously the worst form of journalism, but just you want to stay vigilant. So this is an example of like a completely AI generated thing. Not all AI is super obvious. I mean, because I don't think ChatGPT usually says like it's not just blank, it's not just X, it's Y. And when it says that a lot, that's a telltale sign it's AI, because no real human says that much. But I don't think it said it at all this time. So maybe they fine-tuned it to not say it or something. I don't know. Either way, it's a little harder to tell this is AI, but this is AI, and I'll put the conversation chat link in the description of this video, alright? Thanks for watching, guys. Goodbye. I'll see you in the next one.